Good morning, everyone. My name is Fred Combs. I'd like to welcome you to the Lextran Board of Directors meeting for October 2024. And before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to remember Ms. Sharon Newman, whom we lost after 30 years of service here at Lextran on September 24th. Sharon was an integral part of what we do and who we are. We've missed her dearly and missed her daily. She served as a transportation supervisor, and as a transportation supervisor, they're given certain radio call signs. Hers was staff 4, so every time that you hear the radio call for staff 4, that meant Sharon. So to remember Sharon, we're going to formally retire staff 4 from our radio calls from now on, just as a token of our appreciation to her and her work towards our mission. So with that, to lead us through our regular agenda, I'll turn it over to Mr. Harding Dow.
Thanks very much, Fred. Thank you all for being here. We'll call the meeting to order and call the roll. Ms. Rogers? Here. Dr. Capo?
Here.
Judge Thurston?
Here.
I believe Ms. Berry is not here. Mr. Schoninger?
Here.
Mr. Ward?
Here.
And Ms. Borges Gonzalez, are you on with us?
Not yet.
Okay, sorry, I saw a participant there. All right. Seeing as we have a quorum, and I appreciate everybody coming this month, we will move on to any public comment. All right, seeing none, we will approve the minutes from August, September, and the September special meeting. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes, and are there any comments or corrections? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve them all? Thank you, George. Is there a second? Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We'll forego the chair's report and move into the Finance Committee report of the audited financial statements. Mr. Ward.
Thank you. Our Finance Committee met on September 25th to review the draft audit report. The audit shows an unmodified opinion, which means that the auditors concluded that Lextran's financial statements were presented fairly in all material aspects and were in accordance with generally accepted accounting practices. So big thanks to Nikki and her team. They do a great job all year, which makes the audit process, which is a long process, it goes a lot smoother, obviously. I'd like to say Lextran's financial position is stable. Our pension is fully funded, which is a wonderful position to be in. And our primary concerns are the increasing cost of paratransit, as we all know, and then the cost of fleet replacement. But we've got some good news on that. We continue to get grants, and we're getting some of the matching funding from outside of our own budget, which is very helpful as well. As the Finance Committee does every year, the audit report is reviewed thoroughly with Brad Shelley, who was from Crow, and so we go through it page by page in the Finance Committee. We will not do that here today. But we have Shelby Lee is here from Crow, and she'll give us a brief overview.
Shelby, thank you.
Hi, for those of you that don't know me, I'm Shelby Lee, as George just mentioned. I've been working on the Lextran engagement for several years with Nikki and her team, and kind of echoing what George said, we appreciate the relationship, and we definitely appreciate the readiness and the eagerness of Nikki and her team to work through the audit process, which may not be the most thrilling part of someone's job. I'll quickly go through a couple key points in our audit report, but if you guys have any questions, feel free just to jump in and let me know. So the first item, George mentioned you did get an unmodified opinion. So what that means is you guys have hired us for a service. The one thing that we're doing is reviewing all of the underlying financial records, trying to make sure that they're free from material error and there's no misstatements. And then we will report an opinion on that, which is at the front of the audit report. So it was unmodified. That's the highest level of assurance that we can give. In addition to that, one thing to note is you can have an unmodified report even if there are minor misstatements, but we had no audit adjustments or misstatements that we identified at all during the audit this year. So big kudos to Nikki and her team. Included in the audit report, you will see your statement of net position, which is going to be all of the assets you own, your liabilities, and then I lost my train of thought there. And your net position balance. It's fairly consistent with the prior year. The two areas that changed is your cash decreased a little, but that was from the funding and purchasing of fixed assets, mainly buses. Some of those buses were funded through grants received in the current year, and then due to timing, some of that money will be received next year to cover the purchase of the buses. The next kind of major statement that we audit is your statement of activity. So overall, your operating revenues and expenses remained consistent year over year, no big changes there. You will see that there was a decrease in non-operating revenue this year. It's very consistent with the industry. Last year, you guys received the last of your ARPA funding from COVID. Now that all that has been dispersed, you won't see such a large non-operating revenue. Another reason for a slight decrease in the non-operating revenues is last year, at the expiration of the new market tax credit, you guys recorded a gain. Also not something to expect in future periods. So going forward, the statements will be pretty comparable year over year to you guys unless there are other one-off transactions that may arise. There's also a statement of cash flow, which is just going to show the changes in your cash, your inflows and your outflows during the year. Again, nothing out of the ordinary there. The biggest item we like to note is that your net cash flows from operating and then your funding from grants essentially net. So you're operating pretty well with your funds. The only change in cash, again, was just the purchases of your fixed assets for buses during the current year. Also included in your financials are just your notes to the financial statement. It gives a little more detail, information on your accounting policies, a little bit of information on key estimates. There were no new accounting standards that were adopted this year, so we had a few of those the past few years, but none at this time that would have changed anything in your financials for you guys to be aware of. In addition to your basic financial statements, towards the back, there is a schedule of federal expenditures. We also perform an audit directly over the receipt and disbursement of those federal funds to make sure that they're in line with the appropriate laws and regulations. We also perform an audit of the controls related to the federal funding and the spending to make sure that there are proper controls in place. Both of those were also unmodified opinions, no issues or concerns to report to you guys. Finally, a couple of required communications to you guys. There's a required communication letters, I think that was in your packet. So just, we kind of discussed our responsibility is to review your financial statements. Management, that responsibility is to prepare the underlying records and make sure to review and maintain oversight during the audit process. We did perform some non-audit services that were required to communicate with you guys. These are acceptable under the AICPA and would not impair our independence. So that's kind of the assistance of the preparation of the financial statements themselves. We do prepare those directly from the underlying reports that we receive from Nikki, and then Nikki does a review to make sure that those are correct. Same with just preparing this schedule of federal expenditures included in the financial statements. If there were to have been any changes in accounting policies or any unusual items in the audit, disagreements with management, instances of fraud.
Hello. Mr. President, how are you? Doing good, how are you?
Oh, Dr. Capo, you're not muted.
If we would have run into any issues, disagreements with management, fraud, we would disclose that to you now. However, there were no such matters this year. So again, overall, fantastic audit year. We appreciate the relationships. Did anybody have any further questions?
Yes.
Just a comment. Thank
Yeah.
you, and thank you to our team and Finance Committee, and thank you. It's a big task, and I don't think I'm intelligent enough to even ask you questions.
Thanks very much.
Oh, I have one quick question.
Oh, yeah.
And you guys may have asked this in the Finance Committee, but sometimes we use this time as an expert, and you guys do a lot of different transit audits. If there's any other trends that you have seen across our peer industries that we should be aware of in terms of our finances?
Yeah, and I think this was discussed at the Finance Committee meeting, and there weren't any matters currently that we thought were relevant. Overall, you all are pretty unset with the curve. You're not behind anything, and as George mentioned, your pension is overfunded, which is a really great position. That's not the case at a lot of transit agencies, so that kind of confirms that you all are doing what you need to do, and overall your operating budgets are in line. So nothing this year, but obviously I know Nikki does attend some of our transit roundtable discussions, so she's highly involved and up to speed if there were to be any recent developments.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so
Okay.
much, Shelby.
All right, thank you guys.
Okay. Anything else from the Finance Committee?
No, sir.
Thank you. We'll move to the monthly performance report and financials. Ms. Elliott.
And so as Emily gets settled in here, we did take a deeper look in the on-time performance on fixed route, that she's going to present some ideas and service adjustments that we're looking for towards December. We felt that at this point, intervention was necessary to improve our on-time performance, so Emily's going to walk us through, during the course of her presentation, some ideas that we're going to be looking towards for December.
Thank you. Excuse me. Good morning. We're going to review the monthly performance report for September. I have the on-time performance discussion after the end of the performance report, so I'm just going to run through everything, and then if you all have any questions, feel free to stop me. It's a lot. So we're going to start with our mission. We serve people in our community with mobility solutions. And September was a busy month. We began the month with Labor Day, offering Sunday level service to the community. We received 2 compressed natural gas buses that were funded by a previous award for a low and no emissions grant. We attended multiple community meetings, such as the US 27 project, which is Imagine Nicholasville Road. So that's the modeling for what BRT would look like. And there are typically several meetings a month, up and down, just depending on the different committees in the schedule. We were able to attend 4 job fairs. You can see Julie there, and then provided 8 educational events. On the 26th, we hosted the Public Transit Committee of Kentuckians for Better Transportation and welcomed folks from TARC, TANK, FTSB, and then RTEC, which is a provider out of Somerset. And then the week without driving began on September 30th. Ran into October as well, but we received significant positive engagement from the community and lots of questions, just sort of exploring our service and what does the service look like. So that was a wonderful thing. Oops, forgot how to use the keyboard for a second. So moving on to ridership for September, if you look at the green line, we are still following a typical trend. Ridership is up from August of this year, but remains down from the previous year. So while we're seeing the same curve, we're looking at ridership and monitoring to see, have we sort of, we were seeing an increase with COVID. Have we normalized at this point? We're not necessarily seeing anything different or anything concerning with ridership, but it is sort of flattening out a little bit. So we're going to continue to monitor that and see how it moves, just to understand a little bit more over time what this difference is and what it means. And here are the numbers related to that. We did have a holiday this month, so there is some additional ridership there. But as you can see, the year-to-dates, fiscal year 25 is a little bit behind 24. So for safety, there were 10 preventable accidents in September, which is much higher than normal. There were no workers' comp claims, so that is a great thing. When we look back through the information, several were related to the hurricane storms that came through at the end of the month when we had like the torrential rain and high winds and all of those sorts of things. And thankfully, the majority of them, while preventable, were minor accidents and incidents. No major injuries or anything like that coming from those. So we did go ahead and implement, along with remedials and remedial trainings for the individuals who are involved, a campaign just as a reminder to stay alert, don't get complacent, keep your eyes moving, these sorts of these sorts of defensive driving training things to help prevent these sorts of things. And then I went ahead and looked at a little bit of information from October, and we have seen a decrease again, so it looks like this is an anomaly. Typically, we would look at 3 or 4 preventable accidents per month.
So Emily, the dates of the change, it was during those weather days?
Some of them were. Overall, throughout the month, it was sort of like the weather made it even worse, if that makes sense. So it wasn't outside of normal month anyway. We were sort of outside of that range, but then that weather day was just a little bit chaotic for.
I believe there were 5 on that day. Is that
Yeah,
right?
there were 5 on that day.
the
So
hurricane came through.
a little bit of extra chaos that that I don't think anyone anticipated exactly how that day was going to fall out. And moving on to maintenance, so we operated 7,271 miles between road calls in September, and then 100% of preventable maintenance inspections were completed. That number is a little bit lower than we have historically seen. We've been operating pretty high in our miles between road calls, and so this month it was just a little lower than normal. We had the change of seasons, we had our first full month of service with UK, so we were on the road a little bit more. There was a lot going on. We had additional accidents. We do expect it to normalize again in October. Are there any questions before we talk about on-time performance?
We're good.
Okay, thank you. All right, So regarding on-time performance, these are sort of some of the things that we reviewed internally. So looking specifically at routes, at a stop level, at a service level, is it Monday through Friday? Is it peak level service? What's going on? So when we looked at those, we were able to identify, and I've talked to you all a little bit about this, so some of this will be a little bit repetitive, some of it's going to be maybe new. But we found that our top low performers, or our, I guess, lowest performing routes were Route 3, Tates Creek, 4, which is Newtown Pike, and this will be on the next page for you as well as I continue through some of the recommendations. Route 5, which is Nicholasville Road, Route 12, Leestown, and Route 16, which is Southland Drive. So when we're looking at those, we found that they were performing worst during the weekday afternoon peak hours, so somewhere between 4 and 6 p.m. And when we looked at it a little bit deeper, more like somewhere between 3 and 7 p.m. Okay, so it's as we moved into and out of, those times were impacted as well. So when we're looking at what we can fix, whether it's schedule adherence, do we change the schedule, do we change the pattern, do we do a bunch of stuff, do we need to do more? We looked at things like, is there additional time in the route? How many extra sort of areas are served off the main thoroughfare? So how many deviations from the middle of the route itself? Where are the hangups happening? Is it happening between this time point and this time point? Or, for example, near UK's campus or near Fayette Mall, if we're talking about Nicholasville Road? Is it only when we're heading out of town, but when we're coming back into town, no problems? Down to stops, the ridership, all of these things, like what is happening. So we've really gone deep into some of these to figure out some recommendations that would go into effect in December. So the effective date would be December 22nd for these. And, you know, when we're talking about it and we're talking about these recommendations, I think one of the things that can be really difficult about making recommendations when we're talking about something like on-time performance is there's an impact. And the impact with on-time performance for the public can be reliability. But we have also thought about the reliability of the route for the operator who's driving it as well, right? When you're running behind for a significant amount of time, that's maybe your break, your downtime. If you've had a difficult interaction with your customer, that's your minute to take to yourself to calm down a little bit. And so, in these recommendations, those are some of the things that we're looking at to really think about, like, are we getting people to work on time? Are operators able to get their breaks? Those sorts of things. So for route adherence is really the main focus of all of these changes. But for Route 3, Tates Creek, we were able to look at the schedule and find some time within the schedule. So that route was running behind during peak times and other times getting to the transit center a little bit too early. And so we had previously made some adjustments to that. So the recommendation is to add a time point in the route. So what that allows us to do is to to manage the time better. So if we need to hold the route at that time point, we can hold the route at that time point. So that it's not arriving at the transit center before the other routes are taking off. But it also allowed us to manage the time throughout the route a little bit better and add time where we needed it and just manipulate it around a bit. Route 4, if you've been on Newtown Pike in the last 3 years, you know how bad it is. So the construction, that is a route that historically, but it's been a tight route for a long time. And now it's a beyond tight, untimely situation. So the recommendation is for a realignment or a pattern change, which would have that route end at Citation Boulevard. Currently it does go out to Stanton Way. And it would turn and cross Citation and turn around at Eastern State and then come back inbound. That's where we're finding the most difficulty with time. We're spending the most time in that section of Newtown Pike. In evaluating the ridership, it is not, with the amount of time and the unreliability of the route, it doesn't necessarily correlate. So, it's really, that one's a delicate one because it's the balance of the impact of the people with the pattern alignment with the balance of the people who use the route all the time to get where they need to go. So that's the recommendation for that route. Nicholasville Road has been trickier than I think any of us could have imagined. We have squeeze that route as tight as we can get it. There is not extra time in the route. If you look at the alignment of that route compared to some of the others, we essentially go out Nicholasville Road and come back in, except for 3 small deviations, which are Lexington Green, Fayette Mall, and Walmart Nichols Park, which are all important areas to serve. So we're going to do some additional analysis. Lexington Green is a stop that we've had a lot of discussions about internally for years. The ridership is surprisingly higher than I think any of us anticipated. So the next step for that route is to look at options. How do we move? Do we move other routes? How do we move everything around? But also doing some intercept surveys with folks that utilize some of those stops that were a little bit surprising with ridership. So we are not anticipating any official changes with that route in December, but we are going to continue to move forward with it, and we will be engaging the public in a sort of a different way to continue to gain more understanding of how people are utilizing the route and where they're going. For Route 12, again, it is if you've been on Leestown Road in the past year, it's gotten pretty rough with construction. An underperforming section of that route is the last sort of tail of it, which is the section of Sandersville Road that loops near, it does a loop back in the neighborhood. So the recommendation is a pattern change to remove that leg of Sandersville. What it will allow us to do is have more time throughout the route to sort of manage, but we recently talked about going back into the VA. That has added some time constraints, so that will allow us to actually offer more service in the VA again. The space difference is not significant in that neighborhood, and the ridership indicates that a lot of people are not riding there anyway. So we would remove that leg, have some additional trips that serve the VA, and then have some time to move throughout the route to help it be more timely. Route 16 is also a historically underperforming route that has gotten significantly worse. If you're not familiar with that route, it does not just serve Southland, it also cuts up through campus. So it connects Turfland Mall on Harrodsburg Road to downtown via Lane Allen, Southland Drive, and then down through the heart of campus. So you can imagine all the difficulties with traffic and humans and all of those sorts of things. So we looked at several different things. We looked at a realignment, we looked at some schedule changes, but that route needs additional analysis as well before we can make a hard recommendation to say we would like to make this change, so that we are looking at important places like Health First Bluegrass. How do you get service if you're utilizing that? And then, how do you get to your appointment on time? Those sorts of things. So making some of those difficult balance decisions that also offer the reliability as well as the functionality of the route and serving the places that we know folks need to get to. That was a lot of information. Does anybody have any questions before I move on to sort of our next little bit of what we're going to do?
Emily, I want to ask about Newtown Pike.
Mm-hmm.
Were there many people that continued on that were hotel workers that needed to get to Stanton Way or get even past citation to the Marriott?
So individuals versus average ridership is going to be a couple. It's not a significant number. Part of the next step is outreach, and that will be reaching out directly to the hotels and staffing and understanding. Coldstream can still be accessed via citation. It's just obviously it's a different pattern. So there will still be access. There will still be access to wheels and that sort of thing. It's just sort of getting to it in a different way than the routes that currently serve it from Newtown Pike itself. But as part of outreach, that will be a concern, and making sure that the major employers like hotels will know what's going on and have that information so that they and their staff can make considerations. But the average ridership at those stops was low.
So I have a question about the pattern changes.
Mm-hmm.
Where we've made pattern changes, and I think in both cases we've shortened the route, do we know what the impact would be on riders who currently have access to fixed route, but who now would be too far away from, who would now be far enough away from a fixed route stop to qualify for wheels if they had a disability?
So there are several things that we're still working through. That would be one of them. As far as Leestown Road for residential, so from your home trip for wheels, that would be more of the residential focus, and so there are fewer people. I believe, I looked this up and now I feel like I'm going to say the wrong number, so I'm not going to throw a number out there. I believe that the majority of folks in that neighborhood would not be impacted. Newtown Pike, it would be mostly like business and industry focused, so it would be potentially an employment trip, but likely any core residential trips would not be impacted. There are a few apartments out there, but I did not pull the numbers of who all is living there. We're still working through a lot of these, a lot of the analysis that's involved in the change. So these are our recommendations, but the next step is to get information and get feedback, and that's one of the pieces that we do need to look at.
And they would still have service.
They would still have
Just go
service,
from
yeah. It won't
regular service to premium service.
remove them from service.
So $1.60 to $2.
Yeah. So it would change the rate of the fee versus the ability to access.
And does shortening the Leestown Road route remove service from the Masterson Station neighborhood altogether and
No.
served by another route?
The majority of the neighborhood is still covered. It removes service from a portion of the neighborhood, but the length of Masterson Station Drive from Leestown Road to Sandersville is still serviced at 100%.
Okay.
And then I'm gonna say a bunch of road names, and if you're familiar with the area, you will understand. And if you don't, if you're not, I'm sorry. So the route enters the neighborhood from Citation onto Magnolia Springs, which covers the area. That area's been covered historically, like over to Greendale, and sort of the newest part of the neighborhood. And then that section of the alignment won't change at all. It will still hit Magnolia Springs, Lucille, back over to Sandersville. So it's just a section of Sandersville, which is the side that backs up to, I cannot remember the name of the street, on the very back side of the neighborhood.
Fred shared
Spur,
with me a
yeah.
map and it was
Yeah.
helpful.
That section is much smaller to remove than the section of Newtown Park that would be removed.
I have a question.
Yes.
You mentioned it a little bit of outreach to our riders. Do we have like a press plan? How are we gonna communicate this?
That's our next step. One of the things that we need, and we've been meeting weekly, sometimes more than once a week, in offices, sort of talking about all of these things, and trying to, this is sort of, we're on like the, we've bumped up the speed of the video and we're moving faster, we're like, so that's the next piece of it. We're working on the plan, but we need maps, we need, Jason's team has been incredible putting together schedules faster than they should be able to. So we're close on that stuff, and that'll be our next piece as early as next week. So as soon, pretty much it was like, hey, we're going to talk about this at the board meeting today, and then we're going to be putting a plan together tomorrow and Friday to start as soon as we can to get information to folks and get feedback. Normally we would have a little bit more space and time to make changes to the information that we have and get it out to the public, but we're sort of, things that we typically would have in place we're doing at the same time. So any major red flags, obviously we're going to reevaluate, but we want to make sure that we are not pausing in any way and waiting, so that we're not continuing to suffer reliability for folks who are trying to get to and from.
I have some questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
So our goal is 90%.
Yes.
We're at 82%.
Yes.
Which I think is the lowest I've seen it in the 5 years I've been on the board.
Yes.
And so what you all did is say, like, what are the anomalies that are pulling down that average?
Mm-hmm.
Are any of these the worst performing that are really pulling down that average?
So Route 16 is the worst performing route, but when you look at the average, it does
In terms
not.
of on-time performance?
Mhm.
Okay.
It does not have the same volume of departures that Route 3 or Route 5 have. So when we're looking at overall impact, we need to look at who is the worst performing, but also the volume of departures, because when you're adding all of that together, when you're doing the calculation, the volume of departures is going to be more impactful.
And just to, I don't want to interrupt your question. When you say volume of departures, we're talking about like the number of buses that run on a given day on that route.
The number of times that a time point is passed by, so not just the number of buses.
Okay.
Route 3 and Route 5 hit their stops more frequently than other.
Okay. So it's a frequency thing, not a volume thing. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. Keep going.
No, that was very helpful.
Yeah.
So that one has kind of been one of the underperforming. I know in the 2 meetings ago, because we had talked about Newtown and Leestown and talked about the construction. So I do appreciate, we've seen a pattern over multiple months, and now you've dug in deeper to solutions, versus I think maybe in August, it was kind of like, let's keep the course because of all this construction.
Yeah.
So I do appreciate that.
And I will say, we looked at Leestown yesterday, they opened 2 lanes. It's performing a little bit better, but we also know that construction is anticipated until 2027. The opening and closing of the lanes there's only so much we can manage. And then they're doing sewer work just past the interchange construction. So it's really one of those things when Newtown Pike has been ongoing for a while and having an impact, but seeing the decrease that we've had in on-time performance, it's one of those times where you have to make a decision, and you have to try to make the best decision long-term, and that's where we're at.
And yeah, long-term, that double diamond is gonna take a significant amount of
Yes.
time there. So that's Leestown. And then for the same other part that you're cutting off Sandersville, you're saying it's not many people,
No, the ridership is low.
like less than 5? Less
Uh,
a day?
I should have brought that. There was one stop that had 5 riders in a year
In
total.
a year, okay. On this route?
On that section of the route,
On
yeah.
that section of the route. Okay, so we're talking about, on an average day, no one is riding it, but
Not
once
significantly.
in a blue moon, someone rides that part, okay.
There's also one of the interesting things about the end of that route is the end of the line sits there. So anyone who may be getting off on that next leg of Masterson Station would have to go down and then sit through the end of the time. Or they would have to leave their house earlier and then just sit on the bus during that time while it sits. So for cost savings and time savings, I will say I use that route in the neighborhood. And the first time I did it, I was like, I should know better than to sit at the end of the line. And so the 2 corresponding stops that will remain as the outbound and the inbound and sort of the extra time, they have great ridership and they will maintain that ridership. And so those will not be impacted they shouldn't be impacted in any way by the change.
Thank you. And then, the Southland, I feel like several years ago, was that route discussed about being cut altogether?
Yes.
We continued, what was the reason we continued to operate that route?
So as part of the COA, that route was to be removed and folded into Route 8. And so there was a change to Route 8 that was involved.
Sorry, let's remind me, Route 8.
Versailles.
Route 8 is Versailles Road, I'm sorry. So folding it into Versailles Road, that would add some frequency on Versailles Road and allow us to extend that route over to Nicholasville Road via Southland Drive from sort of the Harrodsburg Road, Lane Allen area. When we ran the schedules and the number of operators and that sort of thing, the impact was more than we thought that it was going to be conceptually. Several of the changes in the COA were dependent on another change. And so that was paused, knowing we wouldn't net it wouldn't be a 1-to-1, it would be like net 2 or something like that. So that was changed. We've monitored Southland. It runs, it has okay ridership. It supplements for some folks on Nicholasville Road, getting to and from and around campus. And then Health First Bluegrass is always a concern. That's their main campus. They have prenatal care, they have a pharmacy, a dental clinic, and a full service healthcare. And it's for both low income and indigent patients. So it's a pretty big deal to cut them off to service completely. So it was kind of like a hold, and we'll keep looking at this and figuring it out. We actually looked at folding it into Route 8 again. We were like, we know we've got this sorted out, let's look at it. And then when we started looking at it again, it was a little more complicated than we thought. So that is still, realigning that resource is still an option, and one that we're looking at, but being sensitive to the way that the service works for folks is also important.
Thank you. And then last question, when was the last, because I know around the COA time, that's when we kind of do pattern changes. When was the last time we did pattern changes?
2019.
Yeah.
So it's been a significant time since
Yes.
we've changed routes and
Yes.
changed
Well,
times.
let me say that again. When we did Leestown Road to Antique Drive, that was the last small tweak,
Yes.
and that wasn't that
Oh.
long ago.
But that
was-
was just kind of grabbing the
Yeah.
affordable care
And these are
housing.
pretty small.
Okay.
I mean, they're not quite as small as the Antique Drive change, but these are relatively small and relatively low ridership changes. That's why we can move a little bit quicker on those than like Nicholasville Road, because there's so many people on it. Any sort of change or tweaks, we're more sensitive to that change than what we would be to the other routes.
Yeah.
So thank you. And then my last, more to just end on a positive note, what are our highest performing on-time routes? Because I know
We've been looking at this
that we're
so
talking
much
about-
that
Yeah.
shoot.
Last week it was 12.
Last week it was 12, yeah.
That's great.
2 is doing well.
Yes.
Which is,
Georgetown Road.
North Broadway.
North Broadway was doing well, yes.
North Limestone was doing well. Those are the top ones. Everything else, I mean, they're still in the 90s, but they're lower 90s.
Okay. We spend a lot of time talking about our lows, and so it's also good just to recognize that we have some really good routes.
I'm gonna make a note and I will bring that to the next meeting. When you're only looking at specific things, sometimes it's like, that's doing well, I'm not gonna mess up something that's.
I want to make a statement, and you tell me if I'm right or wrong. Because when you first look at it, it looks like we're cutting service to improve it metrically. But we're cutting service to make the whole system work.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
And
Yes.
people need to know that, the buses have to get back to the terminal on time
Yes.
for everybody to be able to make their connections that they need.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you consider, and I'm just gonna use this example because it's an example that we sort of know happens a lot. I'm a person with a disability. I utilize a wheelchair. I have gone to Walmart Nichols Park here, and I'm using Route 4 to get back home because I know that they will come to the front door, okay? So I'm gonna get on the bus, I have my groceries, I'm gonna ride the rest of the route, I'm gonna come back to the transit center, and we're late, and I've missed my connection. So now I have to wait, depending on the time of day and depending on the connection, somewhere between 25 and 35 to 70 minutes for the next leg of my trip. And I have my milk, which by the time I get home, unless you're buying shelf-stable milk, which is more expensive, it's spoiled. Or my popsicles are thawed, depending on the time of year, right? It's all of these sort of nuanced things, but it's also, I understand what's going on and there's a lot of construction, but I was late for work today and they don't care that it wasn't my fault. Those sorts of things. And so that's sort of like the reliability piece and the balance piece that we're, it's a tough decision for many that may negatively impact a few. And so we're hoping that by analyzing this information and looking at it, that we have made the choices that are the most impactful and the least impactful. They're the most positively impactful and the least negatively impactful for folks.
And your point to the operators is another good one. To make sure that our staff has, good
If you
work.
can't go to the bathroom or you can't eat,
Right.
and you're and not in our staff care enough about their customers and what's happening that they will sacrifice their own personal comfort, their own hungry belly to keep it moving. But that's also impactful on them and their well-being and, the grouchy customer that comes to them. So it's dual purpose to sort of make everything function a little better and make the system work a little better. But it is tough decisions when we get to that point.
Any other
Appreciate
questions?
the analysis.
Yeah, no, this is very, very helpful.
That was a lot of information.
You did a great job
Yes.
relaying it, so thank you. Dr. Kappa, I want to make sure you didn't have any questions before we move on.
I do not.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right, so I think Randolph is up with paratransit.
Yep.
All right, so for the paratransit side, in the month of September, the paratransit ridership numbers came in at 13,905, which is about 5% of a decrease compared to the previous month. But as you can see from the trend line, it remains stable compared to September of 23. Before I click on to the next slide,
Yeah, that's a fixed route.
Yeah, that's fixed.
Oh.
Go down.
am I clicking it right?
There we go.
Keep going. No. How you go back?
You might have put fixed route in there twice.
I give you the wrong slide?
Yep.
Oh, I took off my glasses.
Just start from
All
there.
right.
It's okay.
Yep.
Okay, so
Go
before I get into the productivity, I do want to also mention that the September OTP for RTP dead wheels also did show a decrease when we compared it to previous months. It's also important to note that I don't want to go on and rambling about the same thing that Emily did, but she brought up some good points. Two underlying factors that contributes to the overall on-time performance for paratransit, because we deal with point A to point B in trips versus fixed route, is the ongoing road work that's being done in Lexington. And then also we noticed that it's a high traffic volume during our peak times of service. In order to remain proactive with our RATP Dev, we've started in the month of September to conduct operator refresher trainings and also administrative staffing software retraining. With the software retraining, we focused on optimizing road time and then also reliability with the overall service. As far as the paratransit productivity, as you can see, for FY25, The ridership numbers came in at 42,022, which is about less than 1% compared to fiscal year '24. If we break that down to the weekday riderships and to the weekend riderships numbers, the weekday riderships came in at 11,594. Saturday at 1,114, and then also Sunday at 998. And I believe that it was a typo in the packet that we corrected, which we added the holiday ridership at 199. Total revenue miles came in for the month at 87,333. Total revenue hours, 6,589. Trips per hour at 0.16, and then also you'll notice that the trips per hour shows a increase compared to fiscal year '24 at 2.11. Preventability, well, we're on a good trend for FY25. 2 preventable accidents in the month of September, 1.92 preventable accidents per 100,000 miles, and we've went 28 consecutive days with no preventable accidents. As far as the statistics on the paratransit side, we kept the same slide from the previous meeting. The FY24 peak hours remained the same. We didn't see any changes as far as the 10 a.m. through the 11 o'clock time on down. And the reason why you see that the times are somewhat out of sync is because we labeled the peak time starting from most highest volume on down to the least. As far as the average use, average unique riders per month, it came in at 1,132, and users registering for the mobility app came in at 157. Now, during the proactive stage with Lextran and RTB Dev, we focused on retraining the administrative staff to engage with customers and providing them insight on how to use and how to download the EcoLane app. And with the EcoLane app, it kind of puts the visual real-time control back into the customer's hands. So with the app, they can see how far the bus is away, how many stops that the bus have before and after while they're on the bus, and they also have the ability to cancel their ride if necessary. We've also left in the top 5 locations because they have not changed as well. And as you can see, the second top 5 location is at the dialysis on Leestown, which we do see that there's road work being done.
I think you bring up an interesting point, though, if you go back to that. So Route 12 that we just talked about is the Leestown dialysis. Route 3, which is also up for schedule adjustments, Tates Creek dialysis. And then Walmart North Park is Route 4.
Yep.
So the same locations we see here are the same thing that's causing on-time performance issues on fixed route.
So it's the senior center, the 2 dialysis centers, the Griffin Towers, and the Walmart. And then what was the difference between this one and the other one?
On the drop-offs?
The
Oh,
drop-off.
Drop-offs and pickups.
The drop-offs is pretty much the same with no change as well.
Is
for
this
the
ranked highest to lowest?
highest to lowest, yes. And because we can't change the traffic patterns, unfortunately, we spent a lot of time this month focusing on that, optimizing, utilizing the service the best way we can, and also working with the operators to kind of navigate a little bit better throughout the traffic.
So that's my question is what kind of software is provided to drivers to plan their routes, and how dynamically responsive is it to traffic?
Okay, so the software EcoLane is utilizing a tablet for the operator and also just a computer monitoring system for the administrative staff. Now, the system does real-time updates according to the traffic patterns, so it does display an estimate of trip arrival and destination to drop off. And the same thing goes for the EcoLane app for the customer. It shows real-time every change that it makes, whether it's emergency accident that takes place. It'll also show that effect inside of the EcoLane system for the operator.
Okay. So they're more or less operating with the same kind of information that I might have using Waze in my own car.
Yes.
To optimize my route.
Yes.
Okay.
And usually what happened on the administrative side you'll have a notification box and a comments box. So the comments box allows for the operator to contact the dispatcher or the reservations to let them know what are they seeing in real time. And then also the notifications pop up to let the dispatcher or reservations know of any changes that is happening in real time on that route.
Is the on-time performance measured from the pickup?
It's
time
measured.
Or the delivery time?
Is measured on both ends. So on one peak of service, we utilize the scheduled pickup times. And then also if a customer wants to request the drop-off time for an appointment or dialysis or somewhere in that nature, we utilize that appointment time to manage the drop-off performance.
Is there one side of that equation that is worse than the other? Or better than the other? Be positive.
From the last 30 to 60 days, we've noticed that the scheduled pickup side is more favorable than the drop-off side. So we've also focused on the scheduled drop-off side. So based off of September to October, we did see a tremendous decrease in the lateness on the drop-offs. And
Oh, I didn't know if you were finished. I have 2 more questions. If you go back to, there was one that said about 1,000 unique riders and then about 2,000 unique riders for the fiscal year.
Alan's gonna pull up that ridership slide for you, the graph. So you'll have an opportunity to see it.
Oh. And in our packet, it says ridership is slightly down on fixed.
Yeah. I'll fix this down.
But we're still at about 13,000 rides for the month.
yes,
But then you showed a slide that even though we're at 13,000 rides, it's about 1,000 unique riders.
correct.
So they rely
Very
multiple
heavily,
trips,
yeah.
13 plus maybe. Some probably fewer, some probably significantly more.
And most of the unique riders have a subscription service with RTP Dev. So
And then I also noticed the 157 people, so less than 10% use, well, 20% use the app.
That was new.
That was new for this month, right?
yes,
Yeah.
that was new for this month.
That's new people added to the
Yep.
app.
For this in total. No, that's in total.
We updated that
Yeah,
number.
that's in
this
total.
month, But that's the total. So yes, you are correct.
So less than 20% of people use the app.
Yes.
To book their ride. I also assume of this population, probably an elder population, digital literacy, maybe not the thing they're most confident with is I think of my in-laws don't use a phone that uses an app. So do we have a prediction of why people don't use the app if we feel like that's a tool that will greatly help benefit our service?
Sure. So during some of the listening sessions, some of the information that was provided to us is one, they were not knowledgeable that we had an app. Some of the other concerns that we did hear was the usability of the app. So some individuals, it may didn't express access to hearing abilities.
Yes, and we heard during the listening sessions that it's very limiting for someone with a visual impairment of any kind to use it because the swipes are different if you use a screen reader. So we're working with the Council of the Blind, and during actually a sensitivity training, we were able to sign up the director of the Council of the Blind to pilot the app, to basically say, like, give us feedback on how it works with a screen reader. Because of just the way that clicks happen and all of that. So even if I try to explain to someone with a visual impairment how to use the app, they do not interact with their device the same way that I do in any way. So she's working on feedback for us to say, these are some improvements that I can see, this is how well it works, that sort of thing. So the knowledge and then also some of the limitations just based on the nature of someone's disability.
Right. And then
But
also,
it wasn't necessarily, I don't have a smartphone that doesn't have the app. That wasn't what you heard.
no.
No.
Now, you do have to download the app to your phone, and a lot of folks don't have space on the phone. But what the reservations do at the time of the phone call is actually give them the link They'll send the link out, and then once they receive the link, they'll walk them through the process of adding it to the phone and actually utilizing the app. So,
Because our prediction is by more people using the app versus the phone call, it'll get better routes or,
it'll limit the call volume,
okay.
and it'll allow us to increase productivity at the same time. But the most biggest benefit to me and to anyone who uses the app is that they get to see real time their ride. So they'll know, because it's a shared ride service, they'll know if it's one person ahead of them or if it's a direct line. And even if they're actually on the bus and that route deviates to go pick up someone else for whatever reason it may be, they'll also get that alert as well. Any other questions?
Thanks,
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Financials.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I know you've had an information overload this morning, so I will try to be quick. The balance sheet for September 30th, this is our third month in this fiscal year. Operating cash is at a good place right now. The accounts receivable there, most of that is from the state that we should receive soon, but otherwise our balance sheet looks great, but I'll be glad to answer any questions. Okay, we'll move on to the statement of revenue and expense. I'm very pleased with the month of September. We are under budget at this point, almost in every single line item. Our property taxes are about $100,000 more than they were this time last year, so that's on a good pace. Passenger revenue is about $20,000 more than this time last year. Our state and federal funds, as I stated, will come in soon. There's no issues, just timing. Our other revenue is down, as we stated last month. That is UK. We don't have everything completed there, so hopefully we'll see that those funds pretty soon.
How close are you on that?
I think we're waiting on them to sign.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Everything's agreed upon?
Yes. And so our wages and fringe are at a good point right now. Professional services, this is the one we see a lot of times with timing, but right now we're doing really well. Materials and supplies is a little bit over, and that's due to bus parts. It's kind of a timing thing also. Diesel fuel right now is under budget by $117,000. It was the monthly average of September was $228. The fiscal year average was $244. I looked back at September of 2023, and it was actually $3.38. So it was 90 cents higher this time last year. So we're always happy to see that. Our CNG, which is fuel other, is also looking good. We're at $1.37 a gallon. Our insurance that's the property and liability insurance. I've mentioned this in the past. This year it came in more than we expected, so that will continue to be over budget for the year. But it's about $11,000 per month over budget. So it's we've kind of looked at that with being under in fuel, so we should be fine in that area. Our paratransit expenses are under at this point by $55,000. This time last year we were right at $2 million. This time we had 1.9. We have our dues and subscriptions. It's over budget right now. That's because the APTA, the American Public Transit Association dues, are due in September. So that's about $36,000. So that put us over budget for the month, but it will even out over the rest of the year. But I'm very pleased with the way that the revenue and expenses look right now, but I'll be glad to answer any questions.
My only question is, paratransit is down. I guess that's correlated also to the slight decrease in paratransit ridership last month?
It's also because we started the penalty phase in December last year, so we did not have the penalty phase this time last year. So that has caused the expenses to go down some.
Anybody
Any
else?
questions?
Thank you, Nikki. All right, moving into our long list of action items, starting with the collective bargaining agreement.
All right, so Board Resolution 2024-25, our collective bargaining agreement, requests that the Board of Directors adopt the collective bargaining agreement as negotiated between Lextran and the Amalgamated Transit Union ATU Local 639. The term of the CBA is from July 1st, 2024 through June 30th, 2027. This contract is, the negotiation phase lasted about 6 months, and it was ratified by a majority vote of the union local members on Wednesday, October 9th, 2024. So if there are any questions on the CBA, I'm happy to entertain those now.
Just one technical question, who assisted us with the negotiations?
Yes, so we had Mr. Bill Harned from Transdev along with Claire Vianovich from McBrayer.
Any other questions about the resolution?
Just happy to see it.
Okay, me too. A motion to approve?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Judge Thurston. Did I hear a second from George? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
And as we tee up the next resolution, I think Randolph and I would like to say thank you to union leadership, Todd Birch, the president, Dee King, and Laura Kelly, as well as Gary Johnson, who was the negotiator for the union. Our negotiating team, Nikki Falconberry, Jason Dow, and Chris Withrow, along with Randolph and myself, and then Claire and Bill from McBrayer and Transdev. So thanks to everyone who helped work through that. So the next two resolutions, 2024-26 and 2024-27, are related to our rider amenities at many places, or RAMP program. And Emily is going to walk us through those two resolutions.
So the first resolution is for the purchase of solar lighting. And if you all recall, in 2022, we applied for a 5310 grant and received that to supply solar lighting to increase the safety and accessibility at bus stops. And so this is that grant award. It will apply to 29 bus stops. So this is the physical purchase of the solar lights. At this time, these are retrofits to existing shelters. So the shelters were identified by our team based on quality of life activities, proximity to those, high-density residential areas, specifically those for seniors or people with disabilities. When we initially wrote the grant, the pricing was quite different on these during our research. We currently have a contract with Toller, who has these available as a retro kit instead of a new solar. Some of our previous solar lighting systems are a solar panel in the ground, electrical run underground up to the shelter itself, and then the lighting on the shelter. In this iteration, the panel sits on top of the shelter. There's a very small hole. The wiring is protected and comes down through, and the light is on the front panel of the shelter. So it's a much smaller apparatus that we're using. And so instead of 15, this is the first 29. So this is just the first iteration of this. So we are requesting to purchase the solar lighting retro kit for 29 bus stops. And it'll be the first purchase that we have made on the Toller contract. And so it's using 5310 grant funds of $48,832 and then just over $12,000 of local mass transit funds. Do you all have any questions regarding the purchase of the solar kits?
When you say retrofit,
So
did they already have solar lighting?
no. Under the contract with Toller, we can purchase a shelter that includes the solar lighting as a part of the shelter. Yeah, this is gonna put lights on existing shelters that are already actively out in the system. And so this does not include any shelter replacements as part of it.
All right, so do we have shelters with solar lighting now?
We do have a few with solar lighting now. 5 or 6, yeah.
How's the reliability of the lighting? Is it good?
It's good, yeah, it's very bright. One specifically that we've just recently refurbished is the one on Versailles Road in front of Bluegrass Community Health Center and Global Lex, across the street from Thornton's there at Red Mile. If you drive by it at night, the lighting is great. It's excellent, it's really bright, you can see and be seen, which is obviously really important for folks.
I was really excited to see this.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're excited to.
Motion to approve?
I'll make it.
Thank you, George. A second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Judge Thurston. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Okay.
So the next resolution is for, oops, sorry, I think Alan helped me, is for the installation of the solar lights. So we still have a contract with Shelcon Construction Company. They recently wrapped up some rent projects for us. This will be the last construction project for Shelcon for us in 2024. Since we are into October, we may not be able to receive the lights until later this year, and then the timing may be a little funky. We may end up in 2025 on the actual physical installation of them. But this will be the installation of the lights on the 29 stops themselves. There's no concrete work, there's no anything like that. It's essentially bolting them down, drilling a little hole in the roof, and then getting everything ready to go and making sure they're working. So they should be able to move pretty quickly on these. But it's for, we have to receive them from Toller, and then they'll be installed. And so the total cost for this project is $59,050 with $47,240 coming from the 5310 grant and just under $12,000 from local mass transit funds for our match.
I make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Judge Thurston. Is there a second?
Oh, second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. The next resolution for your consideration is Resolution 2024-28, which is to purchase 6 compressed natural gas transit buses from Gillig. This purchase stems from our recent low and no emissions grant award, and we did receive matching funds from the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet. So as you see in the memo, the 85% funding from the low and no emissions grant of $3.8 million, and then a $675,000 match from the state.
That's awesome.
That's fantastic.
Have any questions about this resolution?
All right, so tank was limited to how many total buses they could buy?
I don't know what the cap for tank was. Do you know? I know our minimum was 1, and we've gone beyond that. I don't know what the maximum for tank was.
Yeah, generally people put a minimum of 1, and I feel like Tank probably put something close to 30.
30?
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to approve this.
Thank you, George. Is there a second?
Second?
Thank you, Ms. Rogers. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Our next resolution for your consideration is 2024-29, which is a resolution to purchase a camera system upgrade. Did I get the number incorrectly?
I was talking about the
Oh, okay.
CDGs.
So this resolution was done through a request for proposals throughout the summer. We received 6 qualified proposals, and we are recommending Transit Solutions, or TSI as we call them here. And they are our incumbent vendor for camera security systems on board vehicles. The term of this contract will be for 3 years with 2 options for 2 additional years each for 7 total possible contract years. The total cost of that is about $737,000, broken down between onboard systems, central systems, and implementation. The source of funds for this is a federal 5307 grant plus state match. So, have any questions on this procurement or project?
Is this a fixed scope or a not to exceed?
I think it's a little bit of both. This is fixed up until there is a support contract, in which we do have options to buy other things should we need them. But
Okay.
that would fall under our
But
procurement
for
rules.
instance, the 374,000 of what I'll broadly call hardware, there's a fixed number of pieces
Yes.
of equipment that we know we need and that we know
Yes.
need to get installed.
Yes.
Our cameras record and store the photos, or store the video?
Up to a certain, it's about a month, about 30 days. That we can recall from the vehicles, yes.
And that's all onboard storage.
Yes.
How often do we go back and look at videos?
Every accident, incident, or anything that comes to our attention that needs to be investigated. So a customer complaint or an issue that's happened on board a vehicle, we'd be able to go back and look at that.
Motion to.
Hang on, I got one question.
Okay.
And I'm just trying to formulate the least complicated way to ask it. I know from having read the recent CBA that there are time windows for reporting certain things.
Yes.
I also know that our costs can increase based on the amount of storage we have. Is there a reasonable alignment between the amount of storage we're paying for and the amount of storage that's useful to us when it comes to investigating any issues?
You stored like actual storage of video.
Yes.
Storage isn't that expensive.
Okay.
These are probably 2 terabyte hard drives, I would imagine.
They're 4 terabytes, and
4
we're
terabytes.
reusing the ones that we currently have.
And
That's fine.
we're moving to solid state, which is a much more stable and appropriate solution for a bus that rumbles. So I don't think that storage is all that.
Okay. We don't feel like we're overpaying for it.
No.
Okay. Great. Any other questions? Motion to approve?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Didn't know if Jamie.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next resolution we have is 2024-30, which is a first for me. I don't think I've ever done one of these before. Is a resolution to establish a special committee of the Board of Directors. In our bylaws, the board does have the authority to establish a special committee. And in this case, we are going to establish a strategic planning committee. The intent of the strategic planning committee is to help advise and inform a strategic planning process. The duration of the committee will be roughly 1 year and will dissolve on October 31st, 2025, unless extended by the Board of Directors. And this committee will follow the bylaws. So it'll function fairly similar to a regular board meeting. The initial roster for the committee will consist of Chair Harding Dow, Jamie Rogers, George Ward, and Lady Juarez Gonzalez. And again, we will work through schedules as we would public notices as outlined in our board bylaws. So if there's any questions about the establishment of this committee, I'm happy to take those now.
Is this really in response because you couldn't wrangle us all into
Yeah.
one place?
It is.
I have a slight bit of guilt about that.
No, it's all right. We figured this would be a more effective way of moving a little faster, though I haven't been very fast at scheduling. So,
Well, thank you all.
we're doing the best we can.
But we can publicly post those, and anyone else that wants to attend. can
Absolutely.
attend.
This will be an open meeting, similar to the Finance Committee.
Or other
Yeah.
board members if you have time. to
Absolutely,
attend.
absolutely.
Okay,
And then there'll be, the report outs the same way that other committees would do too.
okay, thank you. I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Judge Thurston. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Paul. All in favor? Aye.
Okay, our next resolution is 2024-31, which is a resolution to add a money market account. This money market account would be through our current banking partner, Fifth Third Bank. And the purpose of this account is to manage our funds, our operating funds, while retaining liquidity. Through working with the bank, we need to establish 2 authorized signatories, and that would be myself and Nikki Falkenberry, our Director of Finance. And is there any further questions or comments on the establishment of a money market account?
Just a comment, the purpose of it is an opportunity to make a little bit more on the interest side than what we've had. And we do have funds available for an account like this.
Did we determine if there was ability under our legal structures to have invested accounts?
There are ways that we could have an invested account. This is
This is not that.
not that.
Right.
This is a simpler way of having essentially a savings account. It's easy to shift back and forth through our operating accounts. But yes, there's additional steps that we could take in the future if need be.
Okay, good to know. Is there a motion to approve?
I make a motion.
Thank you, George. Is there a second? Thank you, Paul. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
And thank you all for that lengthy slate of resolutions.
One of our longer ones.
That might be the most resolutions that I can remember for sure.
I don't believe I saw a change order report.
No change order report?
Any old business?
No old business?
Does anybody have any new business? No proposed agenda items listed.
Well, just so, we're gonna keep the conversation about those service improvements
Mhm.
going, so I think we expect more information on that coming soon. A couple of procurements that might not be ready for next month, but are on the way. One is a CNG improvement for our maintenance facility, the construction of that, as well as our architecture and engineering contract, which is probably gonna come up in December or January.
All right. Is there a need for closed session today?
No.
All right. Then we stand adjourned. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you
Appreciate the time.
Thank you.